on any social media app that you use. If the app is free for you to use, that's because you are the product. Hi there, my name is Kristen. If you're new here on this channel, I like to talk about cultural issues through the lens of pop culture, media, and public figures. Today I'm going to be talking about social media, and more specifically, the algorithms that run them. So let's do it. If you spend any amount of time at all online, you will have heard a creator talk about something called the algorithm, and it will usually be in some negative light. The algorithm has become a bit of a boogeyman in that it is something that is not very well understood, and it's also being blamed for just about every negative experience people have online. The first thing to really understand with regards to this entire conversation is that on any social media app that you use, if the app is free for you to use, that's because you are the product. You are the thing being sold. Your opinions, access to your buying power, influence over you, access to your attention, these are all the product that is being sold to the company's advertisers and to their investors. Once you understand that the goal of a social media company is not necessarily to give you the best possible experience, but to balance giving you a good experience with how much they're able to capture your attention and use their access to your attention to their benefits and to the benefits of their investors and their advertisers. And once you understand this, that really can change the way that you approach your social media usage. The next thing to understand here is that when somebody's talking about the algorithm, truly, they are probably talking about more than one algorithm. They're talking about algorithms plural. That is because social media companies are using algorithms for all kinds of purposes, and they're using more than one. They've got algorithms that track your eye movement to see what you're looking at on the screen. They have algorithms that determine the optimal crop for images and videos that will get people to look at them and actually click on them. They have algorithms that determine what tags to suggest on your photos. They have algorithms that figure out what content they're going to suggest to you next and what's going to come up next as you scroll through the feed. Algorithms touch every aspect of your experience on social media apps. You've heard of mass production, when companies manufacture large amounts of a product as efficiently as possible to sell as much product as possible and get as much revenue as one can get out of it. Well, on the internet, we are in the age of mass customization. Large amounts of content are pushed out to users en masse, and they are customized to every single user. Every user has a different feed that they are being shown through this process of mass customization, and that is enabled through algorithms. How did we get here where we have so much content that we really can customize every single person's experience? Because you might remember this kind of stuff all started out with users actually telling websites what kinds of things they were interested in. Facebook would ask you to tell it what topics interested you so that it could show you stuff related to that topic. But that method of customizing content relied on the user to, one, know what they're interested in, and two, be honest about what they're interested in. Nowadays, with everybody using their phones, which have the ability to track pretty much everything about what you're doing inside apps, even down to what your eyes are looking at, we can take the human out of the equation. The human doesn't have to tell us what they're interested in anymore because we can look to their behavior to see what they're interested in. And truly, social media companies care less about what you're interested in and more about what will keep you in the app longer, what will get you to engage with content, and what will get you to follow calls to action, like making purchases for their advertisers. How did we get to this point where social media companies don't have to ask us anymore what we're actually interested in for them to figure out what to show us? Well, first of all, it started with everybody getting on a phone and using native apps that allow tracking user behavior much more closely, because web browsers just don't have that same kind of tracking capability. But second of all, it came with our data processing abilities. Data storage is a lot cheaper now. Processing speeds are faster and less expensive. We can actually do something with all of the tracking data that we receive now, whereas before, being able to actually use this much data that people actually are accumulating wouldn't be possible. Of course, processing this data and analyzing this data is not something that a human or even a team of humans is capable of on their own. And that's where algorithms and machine learning come in. The first step in the creation of an algorithm or model is what's called knowledge data discovery. In traditional data analytics, one would start with a hypothesis, something like, because of XYZ, ABC will happen. And you would start with your hypothesis, then you would identify the data you want to use to test it, gather the data, get it in a database, clean the data, run your tests, create a model, see how the model performs compared to your hypothesis, and then repeat that process until you have a working model. With knowledge data discovery, instead, we don't go in with a hypothesis because you want the data to speak for itself. So what types of activities can you do with knowledge data discovery, or KDD? Well, there are a lot of things you can do with it, but today I'm going to be talking to you about classification, affinity grouping, estimation, and prediction. Classification is when you start off with a list of categories and you try to map your data into each of the different categories. This is what's called supervised learning because you are starting off with pre-existing categories. You might classify users into buckets based on their political leanings, their demographic information, what genres they're interested in. Really, the list could go on and on. The next activity that you can do with knowledge data discovery is estimation. Estimation is a bit like classification, except it's used for continuous variables rather than discrete categories. So with estimation, you might be looking at probability, or you might be trying to determine the lifetime value of a customer, or you might be trying to figure out somebody's income. You can also use estimation to help with classification when you're trying to determine the correct cutoff point between two categories. The next activity that you can do with knowledge data discovery is prediction. Prediction can be done using either estimation or classification, but it's done to try to determine a future value. Prediction can be done using classification or estimation, but it's used to determine a future value. You take historical data and look at how past things in the far past influenced things in the more recent past, and then you apply those patterns that you glean to look at current data and determine what it might look like in the future. The next activity that you can do with knowledge data discovery is affinity grouping, also known as market basket analysis or link analysis. This is when you determine essentially what things go together. So with online shopping, you might realize that product A is often sold with product B. And so you would want to start suggesting product B to users before they get to the checkout so that you can try to make more sales. Basically, affinity grouping lets you determine a class of regularities in the data. It's likely what's used by a lot of social media algorithms when they are suggesting something else to look at based on something that you're already looking at. So in YouTube, when you see what to watch next or suggested videos, they are very likely using affinity grouping to group different videos together and figure out what videos somebody might watch based on the video they just watched. There are multiple models that can be used for the activities that I just described. And I'm not going to get into each of those models because, I care about both of us. I don't want to do that to either of us. But regardless of which model that you use, there are a few things that are going to be true no matter what. The first thing that's going to be true is that you need training data. Training data is the data that is used to teach your model how to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. Training data is really going to be the limit on how good your model can be, because your model is only ever going to be as good as your data. This is why facial recognition programs tend to have a bit of a race problem, where they really work best on white faces, and the less white you are, the less accurate the facial recognition program is going to be. And that's because a lot of facial recognition programs were trained on white faces primarily. They work best with the data that they were trained on. Another area where the quality of your data impacts the quality of results, it's every area, but another area where you can really see this clearly is in programs that look at resumes. These programs are trained on existing data, which was created by flawed human beings who in many cases were acting with unconscious bias or outright discriminatory hiring practices. And these programs that were trained based on that data recreate the same discriminatory hiring practices that humans have. When it comes to social media algorithms, your behavior in the app and any data that you give the application access to by either telling it to them or linking your account to other social media accounts that you have is possibly going to be used in training data at some point. And the problem of discriminatory behavior comes up again with social media algorithms and training data, because any discriminatory behavior in the user base is going to be replicated and amplified by the algorithms that are suggesting content for its users. And this is a problem that different social media companies have done better and worse about. For example, TikTok is pretty well known for not doing anything about this issue. There is one type of machine learning that I have not discussed yet, and that's what's called deep learning. One type of deep learning is artificial neural nets. Artificial neural nets aim to mimic the way that the human brain processes information by putting information through a series of nodes and synapses. I'll get into more of what I mean by that in a second. Artificial neural nets can be used to solve very complex problems. They take a look at all of the inputs and your desired outputs, and they look at the data directly and repeatedly, and they sift through it over and over again, looking to identify relationships and determine how the data is related and what the relative importance of each piece of data is. As artificial neural nets look through data, they build the model automatically as they go, and they correct their errors as they go, and they repeat the process until the model has reached the selected level of accuracy according to the configurations set by the user. There are two fundamental parts to an artificial neural network. There are nodes, which are comparable to neurons in our brain, and there are weights, which are comparable to synapses in our brain. An artificial neural network has layers of nodes represented by each of the features in the data, and the layers of nodes are connected by the weights or the synapses. So every node in the first layer has a synapse connecting it to every node in the next layer, and so on and so forth. The input layer is the first layer, and this is where you put in the data. The attributes of the input layer are what will ultimately influence the results we get from the output layer. The last layer of the neural network is called the output layer. This is where your results come out. The layers in between the input layer and output layer are called hidden layers. They can be thought of as a black box because there is no way of knowing what's happening inside that black box. There is no way to know what exactly the hidden layers are doing. Many neural networks make use of what is called backpropagating, which is when you take a guess, look at the results, and adjust the configurations or weights based on the results, and then repeat. And so you're basically taking a guess and then improving your guess with every single repetition as you go. A neural network will process its data multiple times. Once a neural network has looked at all of the data once, that's what's called an epoch. Neural networks will often go through hundreds of epochs, doing hundreds of millions of calculations in the process. This is all sounding a little complicated. Why do we even have to use neural networks? Those other methods sounded perfectly useful and effective. Well, you see, not all relationships are linear, and neural networks can identify and model nonlinear relationships very effectively. Even if all this talk of neural networks was a little confusing and went a little bit over your head possibly, the key thing I want you to take away from it is that essentially there's really only so much control over neural networks that their creators actually have. So when and if neural networks are being used in social media networks, content algorithms, the creators can really only control how clean the training data that they use in the neural networks is, and they can control what desired outputs the neural networks are supposed to optimize for. But they have no way of controlling or even actually knowing how the neural networks get to the desired outcome that they have programmed into them. In terms of accuracy and explainability, neural networks can be thought of as having very high accuracy and very low explainability. So I just dumped quite a bit of information about algorithms on you. You might be asking, what's the point? What does it all mean? How do these magical entities apply to me and my life? Well, my goal with this video was two-pronged. My first goal was really to kind of demystify algorithms, explain what they are and what they can do, so that if you want to go out and talk about algorithms, you have a little bit more context to do that with. And my second goal was to talk a little bit about how algorithms impact us and how they can either be working for us or working against us in some ways. And it all comes down to how intentional we are with the way that we use social media applications. So first of all, how do social media algorithms work against us? Well, they have a nasty little habit of creating positive feedback loops. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say you're scrolling Instagram and you see pictures of somebody that make you feel kind of insecure because they have perfect body, perfect hair, perfect skin, perfect life. And you're not really thinking, and you click into their profile and you scroll through their profile and you're just admiring their aesthetic and also simultaneously kind of beating yourself up for not being able to measure up to the standard that they're setting there. And when you do something like this kind of mindlessly, what this tells the algorithm is that you like these pictures and you like looking at them. The algorithm doesn't really know, and it's not really concerned with, whether your experience when looking through this person's profile was negative. It's not concerned with whether you felt bad about yourself or insecure when you were doing that, and it's not necessarily something you want to keep doing. All it knows is that this person's profile kept you in the app longer. So the algorithm is going to show you pictures of that person and more pictures of people who look like that person, because they might also trigger you to doom scroll through the profiles and thus stay in the apps longer. Another really insidious way that this can take place is with dangerous misinformation campaigns and theories, where somebody looks at one thing related to theory and suddenly they're being shown more and more and more stuff in the vein of that theory until they've been completely radicalized in a certain belief system. For more information about this, I would look up what's called the... Another way that this manifests is through the creation of online bubbles that we aren't necessarily aware that we're in. This is when your beliefs and values are being reflected back to you in the content that you're seeing online, and you're not really understanding that that's not representative of all of the content that's online or all of the world. And you might actually think that your beliefs and your values are mainstream when they're not. This can result in really skewed perceptions of what's normal and what's common. The influence that algorithms have on us doesn't have to be all bad. For example, we really do actually need algorithms, because imagine if you were trying to look through all of the possible content that there is for you online and find something that you're interested in. You would honestly probably never find something. Think about how hard it can be to find something to watch on Netflix, and that's even with the Netflix algorithm helping you find stuff that you might like. So imagine if you didn't have an algorithm helping you. It would just be chaos. You would spend more time trying to find something to look at than you would actually looking at things. So algorithms aren't a bad thing. They actually make our social media experience online a lot more positive and a lot more enjoyable. It's just important to understand how they work and what they're supposed to do so that we can make them work for us instead of against us. The best way to make the algorithm work for you is to use social media intentionally. Just like it's unwise to mindlessly snack on a bag of chips because you're going to end up at the bottom of the chip bag with a stomachache, it's unwise to mindlessly scroll through social media. You really want your usage of social media to be with intent. You want to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you're getting out of it. You don't want to just be scrolling forever because you're bored, with every single swipe down the screen being like another chip in your stomach that will eventually cause you some regret later. Instead, what you want to do is make sure that you're looking at stuff that brings you joy. Think about Marie Kondo. website bring me joy? Does this account to look at bring me joy? If not, get rid of it. If you come across something that you really don't want to see more of, you don't want to see more stuff like it, the best thing that you can do is keep moving past it. Don't give it a dislike. Don't leave an angry comment. Just move on. Don't send it to somebody else to show them how bad something is, You just got to keep moving, because any interaction that you give with a piece of content is going to tell the algorithm that you're interested in it and that you just engaged with it, so it should show you more of it. So if you don't want to see something, the best thing you can do is ignore it and keep moving past it. And on the other side of things, if you see something that you like, if a creator is doing work that you think is important, if there's a certain type of content that you really want to see more of, then you should comment on that stuff, like that stuff, send that stuff to friends, because those actions are noted. And when you do things like that with certain types of content, it's going to show you more of that type of content because they want you to engage with it. Now, what should you do if you feel like you've developed a relationship with your social media apps where they've kind of weaponized your mindless scrolling behaviors against you? How can you kind of fix that, get out of that? Well, I think that's honestly a whole other video that I could do, but to keep things short and just give like one good tip, I would say make use of the mute, unfollow, and block features, and use them judiciously. Use them ruthlessly. It doesn't matter if somebody is your friend and you like them. If their posts are making you feel insecure or they're upsetting you, mute that person. Or better yet, unfollow them. A real friend will understand that social media following does not equate to friendship. And if somebody really is posting stuff that's not good for you, you should be able to tell them that. And if you can't tell them that, then you can just mute them and they'll never know that you're not seeing their things. You don't want to get caught up in whether or not you're going to be hurting somebody's feelings, because everybody's responsible for their own feelings, first of all. And you're perfectly capable of saying things nicely if you do feel like you need to have a conversation about why you unfollowed somebody. For example, if they ask why you unfollowed, you can tell them. But otherwise, you really don't need to worry about other people's feelings in the context of who you follow on social media. Because you want to create your online space something nice and peaceful and relaxing for you to come to. You want to curate it, and you don't want it to be something that is just the result of haphazard actions. Another way that you can make social media algorithms work for you is by intentionally creating a bubble. I know I said that bubbles are a bad thing, but that's really only when you don't know that they're there. If you are using social media to relax and you want to create a space that just feels nice when you get online, make that bubble. If you want to see cottagecore stuff all in your feed, or you want to see cute animals all in your feed, the way that you do that is you seek out those posts, you engage with those posts, you share those posts, and anything that's not what you're looking for, you keep scrolling past. And in this way, you can make the algorithm work for you. You can make the algorithm find you stuff that you like, stuff that you actually want to see. So that's everything I have for you today about social media and the algorithms that run them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please comment on the video so that you'll see more videos like it. And please feel free to subscribe. I really appreciate everyone who watches and anyone who gets this far in the video especially. It means a lot that anybody looks at the stuff that I'm making at all. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.